What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today, we are talking about Wan'Dale Robinson, who is off to an extremely hot start to his 2025 season. Now, we had higher expectations for Wan'Dale Robinson going into this year, coming off of the 2024 season where he received a career high in targets by a long shot. He put up a bunch of receptions, but he didn't put up a whole lot of yardage last season. But that's changed so far in 2025. He's still getting a lot of targets. He's getting a lot of receptions, but he's actually putting up some yardage. He's being utilized as a downfield threat, being targeted downfield. And I saw today, Alex, Russell Wilson, during his press conference yesterday, said that Wan'Dale Robinson reminds him of Tyler Lockett. Now, that's pretty interesting. Lockett was a great receiver for the Seattle Seahawks for a very long time. I think he's on the Tennessee Titans now, which is like the end of an era kind of thing, of course, with Russ being on the Giants too. But that's pretty high praise from Russell Wilson, and we used to have this narrative among Giants fans that Wan'Dale was too small to be utilized downfield. He couldn't become a threat as a deep receiver. But then Russell Wilson steps in here and says, no, he's actually Tyler Lockett to me, and I'm going to use him downfield all the time because Tyler Lockett used to be a hell of a deep ball threat with the Seattle Seahawks. So some exciting stuff here. Hot start to the season for Wan'Dale Robinson. Alex, I know that's your guy. I know you're really happy about this. Tell me more about how excited you are for this hot start from the season from Wan'Dale Robinson.
I'm very excited. I'm excited to dive into his stats. And guys, if you think that Wan'Dale Robinson can cross 1,000 yards this year, and I absolutely think he can. Hot take, now very, very cool take. Make sure to hit the like button below and subscribe. Appreciate you guys. So if you think Wan'Dale will cross 1,000 yards, hit that like button for us. Really helps us get the podcast out there and get new people in the community. So much appreciated. But guys, Wan'Dale Robinson, in my opinion, was and still is one of the more underrated pieces on this team. He's extremely dangerous after the catch. He hasn't dropped a pass yet, and a lot of people said small catch radius, bad hands. He has not dropped a pass. He's looked really sure. He had that one down the sideline. I know they didn't label it a drop, but it was a catchable ball, so I will mention that just to be fair. But so far, Malik Neighbors had that 167 yards and 2 touchdowns, 9 receptions against the Dallas Cowboys. Everyone's freaking out about Neighbors. Everyone forgot about little good old Wan'Dale, and he put together 142 yards and a touchdown. It's easy to forget about him because Neighbors just looks so freaking good. But Wan'Dale, 5'8", 185 pounds. This guy's got a lot more talent than his height suggests, and I'll tell you why. He's shifty, he's fast, and he's an ultra-competitive player. The way that he tries to fight for extra yards, he doesn't care that he's smaller than some of these guys or most of these guys. He's going to try and fight for those extra yards, get that first down, and downfield, he's been extremely effective. So, just looking at his receiving depth up to this point, he's caught 3 of 4 targets on passes 20-plus yards downfield for 107 yards and 1 touchdown. I mean, we're looking at 2 different players compared to last season. In the medium portions of the field, 10 to 19 yards, 31 yards, all 2 targets he's caught, and then short 0 to 9 yards, 6 receptions on 9 targets for 43, and then he has a couple of receptions behind the line of scrimmage for 16 yards on some screen passes. But downfield is where he's making his money. This year, he's averaging 14.1 yards per reception. Last year, 7.5. He ranked dead last in yards per reception last year among receivers. Now he's doubled that. In fact, he ranks 6th in the entire NFL in yards right now. He's having a tremendous start to the season. He's on pace for over 1,600 yards and 9 touchdowns. Now, again, on pace for is kind of a subjective thing. I understand that. I'm just getting excited about it. Just for giggles, he's on pace for. I'd be happy with 1,000 plus yards and 6 touchdowns. That would be a really good season for Wan'Dale, who's been heavily underutilized in recent years.
Yeah, and this is where I'll turn this conversation because all the stats that you laid out there are excellent. They're incredible. He's looked really good. He's the Giants' number 2 receiver now. I think you can make the argument that he was the number 2 receiver on the Giants last year. Darius Slayton was somewhat of a disappearing act last season. This year, he's definitely the 3rd receiver that's being targeted by Russell Wilson. So now the Giants have what feels to be a legit number 2, potentially. A really good slot receiver being their number 2 option in a contract year. So again, that's where I'm turning this conversation now, Alex. I know you said he's on pace for 1,600. Realistically, he's probably not going to hit 1,600 yards. It's only been 2 games. So being on pace for anything is, like you said, it's not necessarily going to hold the whole season. But 1,000 yards seems rather realistic. And if the Giants have 2 1,000-yard receivers this year, with Malik Neighbors, of course, as their number 1 guy, and Wan'Dale Robinson, if he crosses the 1,000 receiving yard threshold, he's going to get paid like a legit number 2 receiver in next offseason. Contract year, and he has brought his A game to get that big payday. And Wan'Dale, I think, is going to earn the crap out of that payday this season. At least that's how it looks so far. But Alex, how much? How much are you willing to pay for Wan'Dale Robinson? You look at slot receivers around the league, number 2 receivers around the league, it's not going to be cheap. I think of a guy like Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir is making, I think, $13 million per season, has never reached 1,000 yards in a single season in his career. If Wan'Dale goes for 1,000 yards this season, again, Darius Slayton making $12 million per year. He's never hit 1,000 yards either. If Wan'Dale goes for 1,000 yards this season, that floor for the annual average value on his next deal could elevate past $13 million per season, which is a pretty penny. And I'm curious to know if you think that's something that the Giants are going to consider worth signing him to.
Yeah, listen, when it comes to the receiver position, it is hard to find productive, good receivers in the NFL. Wan'Dale, we're seeing his peak performance right now. I mean, he's a very interesting player because, like, you look at him and you're like, this guy should not be a downfield threat, but he is. He gets open. He creates separation, and he's very dangerous out of the slot. I think his best days are ahead of him. Like, even if he puts up 1,000 yards this year, I still feel as though Wan'Dale's best days, he's only 24 years old, to be 25 next year. Traditionally speaking, that's where the Giants and Joe Schoen, assuming that Joe Schoen's even here next year, that's kind of where they like to invest in players 25 and below. So they've gotten a lot of those deals done with Dexter Lawrence and obviously Andrew Thomas, like before they even turned 25. And now they're just kicking in now. So like you look at Wan'Dale, I don't think he wants to leave the Giants. I think he wants to see this through. I think he wants to be here. I get the sense he likes being in New York, even if they are a losing team right now. I think he does believe he can be a part of that winning culture. The Giants also need players like him, like guys that just exert maximum effort. You can't afford to lose another guy with that type of energy. But I'll say this. You mentioned the cost of Wan'Dale. He's a more productive receiver than Darius Slayton by a pretty long margin right now. Like it's pretty obvious. You just look at the stats, like they're using him far more than Slayton. And Slayton, like you mentioned, got a 3-year, $36 million deal with $22 million like guaranteed. Here's what I would kind of, if I were the Giants, consider. Like, I'm going to be straight up with you. I don't even hate the idea. Like, if this season goes off the rails, I wonder if teams would call on Slayton as a trade piece. It is something that I would consider if teams needed a receiver, like a team like the Chiefs. I don't know if they have the money for it, but if somebody was calling and they needed a receiver like Slayton, I wonder if the Giants would move him. I know they view him as a leader and whatnot, but I feel like you could replace him in the draft. And if you had Neighbors, you used a second-round pick on a receiver, and then you had Wan'Dale, you could bring the cost down a bit and then give Wan'Dale that money that you essentially traded Slayton away for. I like Slayton. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think he's a fine player. I just don't think they use him enough to justify his price tag. So that's kind of like, that's where my theory would come in. That's where my justification. But for a contract in terms of what Wan'Dale might get, I actually would use this as a pretty good base, like benchmark as to how I'd structure it. It's basically a two-year deal with an out after that second season. I think Wan'Dale, you'll probably have to kick in a little bit more guaranteed. You're probably looking in more like the 3-year, $42 million range because of the cap going up, and you're probably giving him more like $27 million guaranteed. So, if we look at that, 42 divided by 3, that's $14 million per season. I feel like that's a reasonable price for him. You have him locked in for a couple more years. Receiver prices are skyrocketing. The cap's going up. By the time that contract comes to an end or you have to make a decision on it, you have that out, and that looks more like a nominal deal. And then you can go ahead and try to draft a receiver to bring the cost down next year. So, that's kind of what I'd see. 3 years, $42 million out after the second season, about $27 million guaranteed. That feels like it makes sense, assuming that Wan'Dale puts together a consistent year, doesn't get hurt, and obviously finishes strong.
Yeah, he's going to need to finish strong, and that was the next thing that I was going to bring up here. I'll say this, though. I agree with you. Like I said, the number 2 receiver on this team is not Darius Slayton. It is Wan'Dale Robinson. For Slayton to be paid as the number 2 guy, and Wan'Dale, of course, going into this contract year on his rookie contract. I mean, next year, I would love to keep Wan'Dale Robinson. I think having a great slot receiver can be tremendously valuable. I think it can hold defenders in the middle of the field and open things outside for Malik Neighbors long term. So there are so many reasons why I would argue for and be a proponent of extending Wan'Dale Robinson. A little bit of a late bloomer here. It's the last season of his contract, and now he's hitting a stride. And granted, it's only been 2 weeks, but if he keeps this up, yeah, I do want to keep him back. But keeping this up is going to be the second key aspect of this, Alex. The Giants inevitably sometime this season are going to have a quarterback change. Right now, Russell Wilson is hitting all of these deep shots. He's throwing the ball downfield to Neighbors. He's throwing the ball downfield to Wan'Dale Robinson. When Jackson Dart is in the lineup, how is this offense going to shift? How is it going to change? Are the rookies' growing pains going to hold back some of these playmakers? That's something that you need to keep in mind. If you're Wan'Dale Robinson, man, you want Russell Wilson in there every single game this season. You might believe in Jackson Dart. You might say, hey, Jackson Dart is great, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And for me, as Wan'Dale Robinson, it ain't broken. It is working like a well-oiled machine right now with Russell Wilson throwing me the football. I want him in the lineup as long as possible. That would be the perspective that Wan'Dale would have because Russ is getting him the ball. And again, I think everybody knows I'm a major believer in Jackson Dart. I was a huge fan of him in the pre-draft process. I said he would be a steal in January, and the Giants drafted him all the way at the end of April. So this is by no means me slighting Jackson Dart and saying that he's not going to have great production. All I'm saying is rookies struggle. They have growing pains. That's inevitable. So when Jackson Dart enters the lineup, Alex, do you think that could have an impact on Wan'Dale Robinson that might slow down his pace here and potentially affect him as he goes into free agency in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, listen, affecting him, you know, I have to think about Jackson Dart. Obviously, like you're saying, like, can Jackson Dart maximize Wan'Dale the same way Russell Wilson has so far? I think he can. You know, I think that the play style, especially because the screen game is going to be a much more important part of the offense when Jackson Dart does take over. I think Wan'Dale, what we're seeing with Wan'Dale right now is like the opposite of what I actually anticipated. I thought they would kind of get creative with the screens, get Wan'Dale his use case would be heavily screen based, but they're actually using him as a downfield. He's kind of playing the role that Darius Slayton was supposed to play, and that's kind of like unexpected. I didn't really see that one coming. I know they wanted to do that, but like we didn't really think it was going to turn out the way it has so far. Of course, this long season ahead of us. But I do think that Jackson Dart, I mean, we saw it at Ole Miss. He can throw the ball downfield. And I think him learning and watching Russell Wilson, the timing, the process, the preparation, like he's going to step in ready to do the same thing, you know, throwing the ball deep. And what I love about Jackson Dart and Anthony, I think you pointed this out pretty clearly when it comes to evaluating Russell Wilson after week 1 and then week 2. The difference between Russ in week 1 and week 2 was he was keeping his eyes downfield. In week 1, his eyes were dropping. I mean, obviously Marcus Bowe kind of stabilized the entire offensive line. They looked a lot better in week 2, but he kept his eyes up and he was able to find those receivers downfield by doing so. And I think that Jackson Dart, that's his strength. That's his superpower, that he has the ability that when he's under duress, under pressure, he keeps his eyes up. And I think that's going to be really, really good for guys like Neighbors, even guys like Slayton, and especially guys like Wan'Dale, who they're scheming open on these plays. Like they're with intent getting him downfield and they're operating out of the slot. They're bunching the receivers, getting unique and creative with it. But I have to give credit to Mike Kafka as well. Like he's the one that was able to call those plays at the right time against the right coverages and identify it's not Slayton that should be getting these passes, it's Wan'Dale. And that's the guy that Russ, and you mentioned it earlier, compared him to Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett was one of the best downfield receivers I've ever seen. And the reason was he is so slippery in coverage. He's able to create separation, and the schematics are really good. Honestly, it seems to me, I wonder if we were to go back at the film for the Seattle Seahawks, Anthony, and see if they're running similar concepts for how they're actually getting Wan'Dale open as it did with Tyler Lockett. I wonder if Russell Wilson brought some of those plays over because they work, and he's clearly like stating verbatim that he reminds me of Tyler Lockett. They're different in many ways, size, you know, they're kind of playing styles, but their abilities downfield are similar. Like they can get open and they can make plays and big plays. So I'm pretty excited to see how the chemistry continues to develop here with Russ and Wan'Dale. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was a fall off in production once Dart does take over, because it's going to take a little bit of time for them to get on the same page. I do think that keeping the familiarity though with his playmakers is important, which is why I am an advocate for keeping Wan'Dale long term, because I do think that Dart will eventually play with Wan'Dale. They'll get reps together, and then letting him leave after that would kind of feel like a move in the wrong direction. Especially because it's really hard to find effective slot receivers, especially ones with this type of upside. They're not so easy to discover all the time. They have very specific use cases, and I think Wan'Dale is actually kind of breaking that mold a little bit for a guy that's so small.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that slot receivers, it's a weird misconception that people have that they can't be vertical threats downfield and go deep. They might be smaller. People think, oh, they hover around the line of scrimmage. They only work over the middle of the field. It's just not true. There's so many ways in the modern NFL to get the slot receiver open down the seams and attack cover twos and cover threes. And that's what you're seeing Russell Wilson do. But again, that's because he's a tenured veteran. He's got plenty of experience. He's seen every defense over the last 10 years. So he knows what to look for and how to get the ball to Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot. And that's why, yeah, you guys know I'm really high on Jackson Dart. Like you said, Alex, he keeps his eyes downfield. He can hit those deep balls. I don't have any, doubts in his ability to do those things. But he's a rookie, so he hasn't seen all these coverages, and he's going to miss a few throws, and he's going to have growing pains. That's inevitable. And so I'm just curious how that's going to affect Wan'Dale as we do get through the rest of the season. We're really excited for Wan'Dale, really excited for the potential of this offense. We're finally starting to see it reach its potential, but now we've got a tough game against Kansas City on Sunday night. They need to come out swinging. They need to have another great offensive performance, and hopefully the defense can be a little bit better this time around. But that's going to do it. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go New York Giants.
Perfect.